Hey everybody, welcome back. It's been a while since I've had a video on this channel, but I wanted to get back into it, and I figured doing Advent of Code again would be a good way to do that. So Advent of Code just started up yesterday. Today's the 2nd of December, but I'm going to start at the beginning and go through there until, until I run out of time or I can't figure things out. But like the last time I did it, I want to follow a TDD methodology, that's test-driven development, using PHP and PHPSpec. I've got PHP 7.2 installed, the latest PHPSpec, and this time I've got a runner that I created with a little gulp script that will automatically run my tests anytime either my tests change or my PHP code changes, and if it works, then it's going to automatically commit in Git. And so what that'll give us is a whole bunch of commits that are very, very small changes. Since every time I change a file or every time I manually save, that watcher will catch it and it'll run. And so what we want to do is have a whole bunch of little tiny commits that move from one set of working software to another set of working software. And then the other great part of that is if I ever get to a spot and I can't figure out how to get the test to pass pretty quickly, I can just reset back and try again, because probably it means that there's something about it that I don't understand. So with all that out of the way, let's get into it. So day one, our first puzzle is we were shrunk down with a little bit of Honey, I Shrunk the Coder style thing into a computer, and we need to solve a CAPTCHA to prove that we're not human. And we've got a millisecond to do this because, you know, we're not a human. We have to prove that we're a computer. So we're going to write some code to do that so that we can do it very, very quickly. And what we're going to be given is a whole bunch of numbers, and we need to run through the sequence of numbers and find any pairs that are next to each other that match, and we need to sum up the values of those matching pairs. So we've got some examples down here that we'll use to kick off the TDD. And then once that's in place, I think instead of having a separate runner like I did back in the Advent of Code 2015, I'm going to write a failing test and see what it says the answer is going to be and see if that works. I have not solved these this year. I think last time I did them, I solved them and then came back and showed what I did again, but recorded the video on it. This time I'm going into it pretty much blind. I've read through the description and whatnot, obviously, but I haven't solved it. I don't know what the right answer is, but hopefully we'll get to the right answer, and hopefully it won't take too long. So let's get on into it. So I'm going to go over to PHP Storm. I've got a terminal set up. I've got my project set up, and this is all going to be on GitHub. Some of it already is. I've got my gulp file for listening, and in just a second here, I'm going to run that. Actually, I guess we'll do that now. Let's run that. So there's my gulp file, and I'm not a gulp. I'm not a gulp person or a JavaScript person that much. So if I'm doing it wrong, please feel free to let me know and submit a pull request or something to help me out. You know, like I see watch and debug here are gray, which I think indicates that they aren't being used. But I don't remember why I put them in there, but I copied this from a previous time when I got this to work, when I wanted a thing to run a bunch of tests and automatically commit, and that's what I came up with. So it may be left over. I'm not sure. I don't know why that's highlighted. But anyway, if you're watching this and you know, please feel free to let me know. I would appreciate it. All right, so it's running. There's no changes. There's no PHP files to run. So we need to start off by building a spec. So, and I don't need to talk to Siri right now. So I'm going to open up a command prompt here in PHP Storm, and we're going to run vendor bin PHPSpec describe, or desk for describe, and I've set up my composer JSON with an autoload set up for the Advent namespace. So anything I create in there will be found by PHPSpec. So I'm going to call it Advent Day1. And then we're counting a sequence of numbers. So we're counting a sequence of matches. Let's call it, I don't know, sequence match counter, I guess. That seems like a horrible name, but it's best I'm coming up with right now. So we've created the spec. What that did is inside of this directory that just appeared, we have this sequence match counter. And one of the things I'm going to do, so I'm running on PHP 7.2, and I want everything strict mode. So I'm going to add strict mode, and I'm going to go ahead and add in public just to, I don't know, it's mostly to make myself happy on there. I know without it there, it's fine, whatever. I like seeing it there. So now that I've got the description there, this one test says it's initializable, and essentially all that it's doing is it's saying we should have this thing, right? But we don't have that thing, and you can see, or you should be able to see here, maybe I have to restart it, I'm not sure. I'm going to restart it. Okay, didn't run anything yet. Maybe it'll run it on the next one. So I'm going to go back over to the command prompt, and I'm going to run PHPSpec, or actually, you know what? I'm going to do it from, no, I'm going to do it from here. So there's like 2 or 3 different ways that I'm running PHPSpec in here, right? There's the gulp file, which is automatically running, or it should be automatically running here in a second, and we'll check that. There is the command prompt, which I'm going to run here this time. And then I've also got it set up so that I can run PHPSpec within PHPStorm, and I get a nice listing of the tests and everything like that. The reason I've got 3 different ways is if I run it through here in the command prompt, it'll actually prompt me to create the tests, or sorry, not create the tests, but create the class and the methods that it decides that we needed based on the tests we write. The other 2 won't do that. So then I've got the automatic running one, which pretty much just tells me that it worked and it committed, or it failed and it didn't. And then the one through PHPStorm, which I'll show you here in just a second, which it's quick and easy. I can hit that with like Control R and it'll run it. And then so I can quickly see where I'm at, and it'll show me some level of the errors. So they all have their own kind of benefits and disadvantages, but so let's run it. And it runs the test the first time. It says, hey, the sequence matcher doesn't exist, and then it says, do you want to create it? So yeah, let's create it. Now that we've created it, the test passes. So I'm going to go back and check. So that's not working yet. Let's try one more time to restart it. Hopefully that will start kicking it off. I'm going to make a little change here. All right, that works. So all I did is add a space at the end. It ran the tests. So this is what we want to see, is like the git commit working. And over here in my in GitHub, which is an awesome tool for Mac, you can see now I've got Advent of Code TDD number 1 and TDD number 2, and each one is a little bit of code. So it looks like maybe it worked the first time somewhere. I don't know. But this was the one where we created the spec and we ran it, and it created the sequence match counter, and everything was happy. And then this one is literally just that space. So we're going to be getting all sorts of commit messages, probably not too many more of those just space ones, but it's kind of a neat way to work. And so here we go. We've got the code right there, and I'm going to go ahead and throw in strict on that as well, and save and commit. Yay, it works. All right, so we now we need to start making it do something, and I kind of feel like I want to make it be immutable. So I want to have it where I pass in to the constructor the value that I want to test, and then I call something on it and get the answer. So let's grab one of the inputs. So we have 1122, and I'm going to do public function it will return 3 for 1122. And I'm going to build it with that. So we'll say created with 1122, and we'll say this get sequence sum, I guess. And so we're creating a method that doesn't exist, and we're going to give it some behavior, and we'll say it should be 3. So now when I save, this should fail. So there's a save, and it says run test errored, which is fine. But this is why I use the command line now. So the reason why it's failing, the first reason why it's failing, is that get sequence sum doesn't exist, and we need to create it. So I'm going to go back over, open up the command prompt I had before, and run it in there. And it says, okay, we're missing a constructor, right? Because we told it call the constructor. So let's create that, and then it runs it, and it's broken. And it says, hey, we tried to call get sequence sum. That doesn't exist, so do you want to create that? So yes. And then it runs, and it actually fails. So all the things that it needs to exist do exist, but it's getting a different answer. So we're expecting 3 from right here, but instead we're getting null because this generated code isn't doing anything. So here's our stuff, and let's start making it more useful. So I'm going to add, I'm going to make this be a string. We'll call it sequence, and I'm going to use PHP Storm's initialize fields. So I just hit Option Enter and go to initialize fields, hit Enter again on sequence, and it created this little bit with the type hint. I'm going to get rid of the to do because that's done. When I save though, back in the runner, that's another failure, because actually a whole series of failures as I move back and forth because we haven't got it to work yet. This is probably, I think this is probably going to be one of the larger commits that we have probably in this entire video, but we'll see. So we're looking for a return value of 3. We don't have a return value of 3. Our easiest thing to get things working is return 3, and I'll hit save, and it says still failing. So this is where running this one works pretty well. So I'm going to hit Command-Shift-R, and I can't run that. Oh, look at that. I'm going to pause for 1 second and fix my PHP because I installed PHP 7.2 just before starting this video, so I'll be right back. And we're back. So it turns out the path changed for PHP, and PHP Storm still had the old one, so I've added that in. So now let's try again. Control-Shift-R on the spec, or I'm going to do the entire directory and see if that'll go. All right, we have another error. Obviously, I haven't run this since there. Let's change the project interpreter to. All right, that's bizarre. I just added this. Let's see, it's still in my clipboard. And let's do that. Let's get rid of there. Oop, oop. Apply, let's run it. All right, too few arguments. So now we have it running. So it returns 3 for 1122, which, you know, whatever it should. But it's not initializable because it created a constructor argument, and this test doesn't use that constructor argument. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a thing called let, which will set up our how we want it constructed by default. So I'm going to just pass in 4. Pretty much all of our tests are going to construct it the way we want. So let's run it again, and that's green, which means that this should be committing. Just for sanity's sake, let's check. Looks good to me. All right, so we've now got the first example passing, but this is the methodology of TDD. So we want to add our second one, which will make us have to write some more code until we get to a point where the code that we're writing is actually correct and what we need. So our next one says that if we pass in 4 ones, we get 4, because adding up 4 ones is 4, and all of them match. So let's add that test in. So do public function. It will return 4 for 111. This will be constructed with 1111, and this get sequence sum should be 4. So let's see how we did. All right, fails. We expected 4, but we got 3. That's what we want, right? We just made a test that fails. Now we need to go and make it work. One other thing that I'm going to do, again, I've got strict mode, so I'm going to make this be a strict integer returning function. Now, if we look at what it says on the page, we need to add up how many matches we have all the way through. And the other part is it says this is actually circular. So, in other words, this one could match back to this one, but we're only counting those apparently once. So our answer is still going to be 4. So what I want to do then is I want to loop over the numbers and compare each one with its previous, and if we get a match, then we are going to add that up, right? So we'll probably need something to hold this. We'll say sum is 0 and return sum. I'm not expecting this to work just yet, right? If I run it again, of course it still fails, but now I've actually broken the other test. And that's okay. So now we need to make it so that both of these tests can pass. I've got my sequence in here. I want to split it up into individual letters. So I'm going to loop over those. We'll say for each stir split of pattern or sequence as, and this is a letter that we're looping over or we're looking at each time. And I need now to say, well, what about the first character? I need to store that so I can compare it when I get to the second character. So let's extract that up here. We'll say old letter equals letter, or not letter, but sequence 0. So now we've got the very first letter in old letter. But that means when I loop through here, I'm going to get the old letter compared to itself, which means I'm always going to get 1, which I probably don't want. But it may matter on this, it may not, but that's something that we need to consider. So one thing I think that might work on this, especially considering it's circular, is we've grabbed the old letter, we've grabbed the first letter, or the first number in this case. What if we rearrange the sequence a little bit so that the first letter is actually at the end and we start with the second letter, right? So in other words, if we start with 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to count this one as old letter, but we're going to move over this sequence, right? Which will help us with the circular part, right? Because then at this point, what we're actually comparing is our last digit to our first digit. And then when we start, we've kind of got this implicit like first digit here, this 1 or whatever, that we're going to be comparing to 2 because we've already set old letter. That's, at least right now, that's the way I feel like is a decent way to approach it. So we'll do, we're going to make a local sequence. We'll say local sequence is the subster of sequence starting at the first character and with the old letter appended to it. And then instead of looping over this sequence, we're going to loop over sequence as letter, same thing. But now all of our code gets fairly simple, and we're still broken. Everything is exactly broken as it was. But I'm not going to like panic and reset because I haven't got to the point that I wanted to, and this is this is okay. We're still on track as far as what my plan was here. So we'll do a comparison. We'll say if old letter is the same as new letter, then sum, we're going to add in letter to that. And then always, whether it matches or not, we're going to say old letter is equal to our current letter, so that we're always keeping our previous letter in old letter. So let's run that. And that passes everything, which means that back over here in default, we should have a new commit, which we do. But we're not done. So we need to make sure that these all work. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 should be 0. So let's make a new test. Say public function, it should return 0, or let's say, yeah, let's be consistent, right? It will return 0 for 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll construct it with 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this get sequence sum should be 0. And let's run it. That's working. So we've possibly jumped ahead, possibly not, I don't know, but so far our code is working for that example. So let's do the last example that is provided, and this one is the one where if we don't do the circular thing, then we're going to get a failure, because the 9 at the beginning and the 9 at the end are what we want to match, and in our case, since we're moving the 9, we should be good. So the value of it should be 9, and let's put that in. So we'll say it will return 9 for 91212121229, and this be constructed with that number, and this get sequence sum should be 9. Let's run it, and we are good. And again, our commit should have happened. Whoops. Over here on default, and it looks like we're good there. So now what I want to do is get the full output. I don't know what the answer is going to be, which means we're going to get a broken test, but that's okay because we'll get the actual output, and we'll see where we go from there. So we'll say it will return the answer for day 1 data, right? We'll say this be constructed with, and we'll paste that in, and we'll say this get sequence sum should be, it doesn't even matter, we'll say 4. It's definitely not going to be 4, but let's go in here and copy that out. So we get a nice big bunch of data. Come back in here, we'll paste it into our constructor, and I'm not worried right now about the length of that. Let's run it, see where we're at, and of course we didn't get 4, but what we did get is 1031. So I'm going to see if that's the answer to my puzzle. Your puzzle may be different, so just because mine is maybe 1031. All right, we got it. 1 gold star. With that, I can come back over and change my expected value to 1031, save that, and everything's green. The tests have passed, the commits have committed, and we were able to get through that in 8 steps. Sort of feels like I maybe could break it into smaller steps, possibly, but right now it's escaping me how I would do that. So I figure 8 steps for that is not too terribly bad. And with that, I'm going to end the video and go take a look at part 2 and start recording part 2 in a few minutes. Thanks for watching.